Welcome back to the We Win in July podcast. I'm Tyler Todd, your host, sitting here with my co-host, Jaron, the Snow Canyon Man, Sandberg. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good morning still.
Is it still good morning?
It's still good morning.
Oh, good morning, everybody.
You just like saying good afternoon to me because of the context of the movie.
I feel like you've been a little off, so you needed a really good afternoon.
I needed a good afternoon. Well, good afternoon to you too.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, it's tough to talk about hard topics. Like when we're talking about Cardi B lawsuits and we're talking about Taylor Swift and her engagement, and we're talking, those are kind of fun and silly. And it's easy to get excited about not excited, but just kind of like
it's like there's a video, remember, of the two lawyers analyzing John Wick, and they're like, that's illegal. That's illegal.
Yeah, you can't do that. You can't kill that person. You can't kill that person.
Just because they're on a train, you can't shoot them. You know,
those are funny, and those are fun. These topics, and we're going to talk about the Texas floods and camp tragedies and everything that is going to follow that. These are hard to talk about because it's real loss, real life, unspeakable tragedy to all the people and children that were killed in the Texas floods. And then, of course, all the fallout from that.
Yeah.
And to some degree, it's what we do every day.
Yeah.
And that's, on one hand, it's hard what we do. And on the other, it's great what we do because, in fact, I just flew home yesterday.
Yeah.
Meeting with clients that are dealing with tragic loss, permanent issues that affected their lives 100%. And they literally have no idea what to do. And even at the basic level of where we think things might be easy because of the tragedy and because of what they're dealing with, even, things that seem pretty simple are super overwhelming.
Yeah.
And we see that day in and day out. And you guys have probably been witnessing this with everything that's going on in the world today, like notably the Charlie Kirk assassination. A lot of people are actually responding and talking about his wife coming on and doing her, speech, if you will. I don't know what to call it. It was
kind of her first
an address.
Public comments.
Yeah, public comments, not a speech. That seemed weird.
No, but I think she prepared it and wanted to say something publicly.
Yeah, publicly. And so there's been like a lot of like weird online social media, perspective on that. And the way I took it was what seemed like a normal thing probably for her and her husband to do was at its core very difficult, hard, and then of course it was analyzed and nitpicked for the way she presented herself and what she said I highlight that because it's just what seems to be like would be simple is so overwhelming, and that was probably significantly overwhelming for her.
Well,
that.
You get this question a lot, Tyler, and I get it as well. As people will ask when they find out we're injury attorneys and we're dealing with people that have been in catastrophic things sometimes, and sometimes just major inconvenience to their life. It's, well, how do you do this every day? And sometimes I feel like on certain things we have to just put our lawyer hat on, and you're analyzing things like a lawyer would, and we speak the language and we do it. But us a lot more than the defense attorneys who we like to rail on and go off on. We do meet with them. We meet with these people in our office. We meet with them at their homes. I jokingly bring up one of our clients that could not understand why this man hit her and just was so shocked. And it, even a year later was still just like, I can't believe they did this to me. And I feel like as much as I want to just only put my lawyer hat on sometimes you end up being the other kind of counselor to some degree. And
yeah, when they say attorneys and counselors at law, we ought to have training in counseling. We don't.
Yeah, we don't.
We need it.
we probably need it ourselves.
We probably need it ourselves. Don't they say that like the legal profession is the number one like
thing for alcohol and drug abuse
and suicidal ideation? Because we deal with some heavy stuff, and we do become counselor. We are counselors, not just on the legal side, but for life. And to try to help people get through some heavy stuff that they're dealing with. In fact, we were just having conversations with some other clients recently about, you have to have, it's like doctors, right? You have to just have hard conversations about private matters. And we were talking with clients recently about their sex life and intercourse and sexual organs. And it's like, I don't like to have this conversation, but
it's part of your case.
We need to have the conversation because it's about your case and it's about how it's affecting your life. And not just your life individually, but how it affects your life together.
Yeah.
So it is interesting where you talk about these hard things and you have to then conceptualize and then kind of remove yourself from, boy, this is real. But then you have to spin it and tell the narrative and tell their story and how it's affected them. So it's sometimes hard to talk about heavy stuff and Texas floods and the tragedy that was. And then, of course, what's happening now. And it's relevant because, one, you guys all saw it. It was actually really crazy. I guess in Utah, we're subject to flash flooding.
We kind of do. I mean, in our local community, we had this flash flood that a whole suburban went in, if you recall.
That's right.
Just pretty, it was in the last 5 or 6 years. That was kind of we get flash flooding in the West. I mean,
it does. It happens.
You get these kind of thunderstorms once, they call them 100-year floods. Floods, we kind of can recognize flood zones because you see the path of the river, but then you look at the banks, you can see kind of high water marks sometimes.
Right.
Every once in a while, you'll see those signs. It's like, this is the high water mark from this flood of this time. But we do deal with those. But this one in Texas kind of felt like it just caught that whole area
completely off guard.
Completely. Which, when you put your lawyer hat on, then starts to beg the question, did it catch everyone off guard? Like, if they can be smart enough to know that, like, you don't put your hairdryer in the bathtub and these things, it should be you'd think, like, again, I'm the lawyer. We're going to be talking a little more in detail about Camp Mystic today, but, if I have a kid's camp that's right on the banks of a dry riverbed, if they'd had a meeting with a lawyer, like, hey, just, draft a contract and look at our liability, what's our exposure, or an insurance company kind of analyzing a property. I said, well, your number one thing is you're right in what looks like a 100-year flood zone.
Well, I was thinking that. We have that all the time when you're doing like either with getting an insurance policy, whether it's commercial or residential. Oftentimes, they already know whether you're in a flood zone.
Yeah.
So if you're in a flood zone, then your policies are automatically increased.
Just like if you're in a tornado alley or a place susceptible to tsunamis or something. If you're by the ocean and you're, what do they call that when when the beaches are disintegrated, you're going to have all those types of insurance claims. You'd think this one in Texas, but to be fair, this was, a 100-year flood. This wasn't every 3 or 4 years, the banks of this river kind of exceed their margin. It sounded like it hadn't had this type of flooding in a significant amount of time.
Fair. Were they aware of it? I don't know. Is it possible they should have been? Probably. But question for you, as I'm kind of going over some of our notes, does it feel like this was like a year ago?
Yeah, it felt like
when we were talking about
like
doing
the way
this
news cycles go
topic, immediately I'm like, the Texas flooding. Yeah, Camp Mystic. Oh yeah, that was like what, a year or two ago? No, that was July
4th.
That was
July
literally
weekend.
Like what, 3 months ago?
Yep.
It feels like, and you hit it right square on the head. News cycles and events and social media, and it almost like it's just churn and burn.
Oh, it's fast. It's
right.
It's moving.
Yesterday's news or today's news is how's that go? Something like,
anyways,
I don't know. Like it's just today. What happened today is yesterday's news. Like almost like immediately.
Almost yesterday's news, old news.
It is old news. Yeah. So but to the people that were affected by this, it's not.
It's not
at all. And so, because in fact, before we started the podcast, we were looking at whether there's been any lawsuits filed. And as of
because it felt like a year ago,
right? Like, but as of right now, there aren't.
Yeah.
And on its face, you might say, that's crazy. There's no lawsuits filed yet, but it's only 3 months. So in our world, and we know this, that because we deal with it every day, that's not that long of amount of time
for pre-litigation
to take place.
Yeah, and so for those that maybe didn't follow it as much, or just a recap, again, we had flash flooding along the Guadalupe River in Kirk County, Texas, and this was over the 4th of July weekend, so heavy weekend for campers, heavy weekend for 4th of July. If you've ever tried to get a campground on the 4th of July weekend, but there's all along this river, over 120 deaths, I think we were confirmed as of today. And there might be still some in critical condition, but the one that really, I think, brought it to the national, and again, 100 deaths is always, one death is too many, but they had 24, I think at least 24 confirmed at this Camp Mystic that were children. And, a lot of just heart-wrenching stories coming out of, waking up with water up to their knees because it happened, late at night. And so even though there were some warnings that went out, either people had already gone to bed and some different things, and so those warnings were inadequate. And so, you have some heroic stories too of some camp counselors, dragging kids out, some that went back in to save children and died. But anytime we see a tragedy like a flood and people die in it, again, we have to, as attorneys, we do remove ourselves from the sorrow of the incident, which is tragic. And then we naturally start thinking, if I get a phone call from a family member that had been in this flood and, hey, my daughter died at Camp Mystic, for example, the lawyer hat on us starts looking at, okay, theories of liability and, what exposure and what insurance policies are there? Is there government exposure? Should the warning system have been in place that was better? We start looking at a lot of those things.
Well, and I misspoke. It looks like there's been one lawsuit filed just last month. The parents of a 22-year-old Jada Floyd did file a wrongful death suit against the Texas Hill Country Resort there in Kirk County, seeking more than $1 million in damages for failure to warn and evacuate. So There has been at least one lawsuit filed, but in regards to Camp Mystic and some of the other government, probably county campgrounds and whatnot, state, that could be state or federal parks along the riverbed, there has been one lawsuit filed. And that begs the question, okay, what is the liability, right? Yeah. If you're that, it says HTR, Texas Hill County Resort or Hill Country Resort, what's your liability, right? Yeah. If you're Camp Mystic, what's your exposure? What's your liability? What are your coverages? Yeah. Okay. Because no one's going to dispute what people, hopefully, I don't know if you guys have been following us and watching us, or if you're familiar with injury law in any way. One thing we've tried to express, and this is a very real issue that we deal with on a daily basis, insurance companies will always fight in one of two ways. One, they're going to say they're not at fault. Yeah. And they're going to dispute liability. Okay. That's why you said earlier, we look at theories of liability, because we have to say, hey, well,
we got to overcome that first step.
That's the first step. And that's how they typically fight. We're not responsible. Okay. We don't have any fault in this. We are denying liability. Two, they fight saying, okay, there's no dispute in liability, but we didn't cause the injuries and or death to which you're seeking money to compensate for. So here, the families of these young girls that were lost at Camp Mystic, no one's disputing the gravity of their loss. Yeah. The insurance companies or insurance company or whoever's responsible or may be responsible, if they're smart, they're taking the approach, we're so sorry for your loss. And it's unimaginable and it's tragic. Notwithstanding the gravity of your loss, we're just not responsible. We're just not responsible.
Yeah. Now, depending on the size of the policy, we know that if the policy is not big enough, my guess is that you have 24 victims. They're going to say, okay, here's our $1 million commercial policy if they have one. Divvy it up between 24 of you.
Right.
There's the end of our exposure. And now, that doesn't mean that the camp might not have additional exposure. And my guess is that would be rejected because it's not enough. But I just don't know what kind of assets they hold, if any, if the camp was the only thing. Again, I know that it's a religious camp. They might be a nonprofit. I don't know what their assets are, if any.
Right, and their coverages. And it's very possible, because then what comes into play is, well, we got a number of things that could come into play, right? We've got government liability questions. We've got waivers that may come into to play. In fact, we have a case right now where they just opposing side, it's a gym. Yeah. So our client was injured while working out at the gym, and they're trying to waive their waiver in our faces saying, your client signed this. You have no case. Yeah. And we're obviously disputing that and saying, nope, we don't think that applies. And because there was either negligence or gross negligence that we believe would make that waiver inapplicable. So there's those issues that they may be dealing with. So there's probably a number of issues that, an act of God, right?
Yeah. That one you see a lot with floods, fires, different things. If a lightning strike starts fire, the act of God defense, which sounds interesting to like put in paper, like God caused it, but that's not exactly how it goes. But they do use that defense, and you see it in contracts all the time. You see like, this contract is voided by acts of God. And I'm always like,
I wonder today, because years ago, theoretically, it made sense, right? But I wonder if today people are like, that's not my God.
Yeah.
That's
my God didn't cause that fire. That was yours.
I don't believe in that God.
I'll say this sidebar, because this is my favorite case that you had years ago. It was a federal case, and one of the co-defendants in this case of yours had cut off the ankle monitor. Do you recall this
in my case?
It was not your client. You were just representing one of the co-defendants, a federal case, and the co-defendant cut the ankle monitor and was a fugitive. And their attorney was one of the lead attorneys on this case, federal case up in I think you flew up a couple of times. And the attorney, one of the prosecutors brought up, well, why is this attorney still talking? Their client's not here, not able to, she's not representing this client. And the woman, just quick as anything, if I recall correctly, said, wait, we don't know that they fled from justice. They may have been kidnapped, or they may have experienced the rapture. Do you remember that?
Now I remember. I was like, wait a second. Yes, now I remember. Yes.
I just remember thinking like that was some clever kind of almost act of God type that this client, who I think believed in the rapture, may have experienced the rapture, and that, left the ankle bracelet, took everything else.
Look, it's possible.
And I think she was seeing the defense attorney was doing it kind of tongue in cheek, but I do remember that there was a Deseret News article that was defense attorney claims a client experienced rapture was the headline.
Who knows? It's not just because it's not my God doesn't mean it didn't happen with your God.
Yeah. So, in Texas, my guess is they're still okay with that it was an act of God, and which God that means. It, still is the great state of Texas.
Most people, I would say, probably most people there. Not all,
but
it's changing.
But you'll see that defense in those cases is, hey, this was a 1,000-year flood. Never happened before. How could we have known? When again, I still think it's in the flood zone.
Yeah, we had. Speaking of that case, now it's coming back to me, and that community from which it's a community not far from southern Utah. They suffered a really, really big flash flood.
Yeah,
not long ago, and lost.
Like I said, I think that was the one I was referencing with
children.
A Suburban.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
yes,
that was the case I was talking about earlier. Is that I think and again, this kind of happens with like small riverbeds. I think sometimes they think, well, I can drive across it. I'll get it's a big Suburban. If I recall, either they had parked on the other side or thought they could make it through. But yeah,
I think it was a whole, like a family or young kids were in the Suburban.
Yeah, I think it was like 8 or 9. It was a lot of deaths from a flash flood.
Right. So that's, same thing. What happened out there, a little different because not like they weren't part of a resort, weren't at Camp Mystic. And so the question is going to be, I think, for Camp Mystic. And honestly, this is, so just, I guess, put lawyer hats on, right? We don't know. So let's just start speculating. That's what we do. You can object at any time.
Yeah.
Calls for speculation, but that's okay.
Yeah.
My guess is that, and because we haven't seen lawsuits filed against Camp Mystic, or at least are unaware of them, my guess is that they're probably resolving all their claims.
Yeah. Even if they're going to concede the waiver, whether they likely signed it, or if the waiver even talks, my guess is the waiver talks nothing about flooding. But even if it did, my guess is, because we've seen this on even some of our catastrophic cases where maybe they had an argument to be made, coverage counsel basically just says, green light, here's our policy limits.
Well, because then the argument from the attorneys representing any of the families that lost loved ones and were affected by that are going to argue that the location of the camp was grossly negligent.
Yeah.
Knowing that they were in a flood zone.
Yeah.
Because if there was any indication whatsoever that that camp was in fact in a flood zone, regardless of whether it was a 100-year flood or
1,000-year flood, whatever,
that's going to be found to be, in my opinion, grossly negligent. Because just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it couldn't happen, and it did happen.
Yeah.
And so knowing that there was a chance that could happen and that there could be the loss of life or serious bodily harm being caused, I think you've met your standard or the breach of or the finding of gross negligence.
Well, and that was one of the things I was looking at. It was like, again, just for listeners, like kind of the different, maybe just explain the difference between gross negligence versus just negligence. Negligence, we have, car accidents. Most of our car accidents don't deal with gross negligence. Some do, but most of them are just dealing with basic negligence. Someone makes a lapse in judgment, it violates a civil wrong, and they rear-end someone, right? That's a normal negligence case.
Right.
We just were in was it a Jamba Juice? When we went and told the gal, we're like, look, there's a puddle sitting in the front of their lot right where customers order from. And what was funny was her comment back to us, but I said, hey, we're a couple of injury attorneys, and for what it's worth, you got a big puddle out here.
You at least might want to put a sign.
I might put a sign out here. And she was almost like, oh, I don't know what it's from.
Well, then she said too, she's like, I was going to and I forgot.
Yeah.
To put the wet,
but her first
wet
comment
floor
was
sign
like,
down.
Well, I don't know what it's from because we drained all the ice out of this thing. It's clearly from something.
There could still be water in those tubes, even though you took out all the ice that are still draining onto the floor, which it clearly is right here.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like someone had dropped a smoothie.
Yeah.
It was clearly water coming from something that
it looked like a freezer
looked like a freezer.
But negligence, when it's just the freezer's broke, and that's something that, you got to inspect your lobby. But then once we told her, then if she didn't do it and someone spilled, I think that probably then rises to gross negligence.
Rises to gross negligence, because it's almost like you take an action or you commit an omission to where that type of injury could happen. Because you're just ignoring it, essentially.
Now you've got a disregard for the safety versus before you maybe didn't know, or again, that's where we get into arguments of, notice and did you know or should have known.
So like
you knew.
Gross negligence, or maybe synonymous is like reckless disregard, right?
And we see this in reckless driving cases, right? It's
right.
When you have 3 or more moving violations, they charge you with reckless driving.
Right.
Because you were either speeding on your phone. As soon as it's a combination of a few things, now they charge you with reckless driving. Because now you've passed just ordinary negligence of one thing. Maybe you were speeding. Maybe you were not paying attention. But as soon as you start combining them, you get into that gross negligence, reckless disregard.
Exactly.
And I think for a lot of things, when we look at something like this, where you just think, you put a whole camp in like a bank of a river?
In a flood zone?
Flood zone?
Yeah.
And it was like raining upstream?
That
sounds more gross negligence. I'm just completely ignoring it. And then not having kind of again, even if you did know it was in a flood zone, then not having a way to like blare it to the whole camp, wake up and run for high ground,
and then
or
properly
something.
Evacuate, or right,
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then in the state parks, it's the same thing. If there's not like warning signs everywhere, hey, this is a flood zone. Because you see, like when you go to the state park, you go to the lakes over here by our house more often than I do, but there's like big warning signs about like recreational activities and like no lifeguard on duty and different things.
Well, and alarm systems, right? I mean, like in Hawaii, for example, they just recently they had like that. It was a small tsunami, but a tsunami nonetheless.
Yeah.
Due to earthquakes that hit, I think, off the coast of Japan.
Yeah.
Was that where it was? I think. So in Hawaii, they have tsunami systems. They have tsunami alarm systems because they know that they're at risk of suffering a tsunami.
Yeah.
So when there's the threat of a tsunami, what do? Sound the alarms. So that's another example of why, if they know they're in a flood zone, why isn't there some type of an alarm system?
Yeah.
What? Because budget constraints?
Or it doesn't happen often?
It's too expensive to only warn maybe a few people or a dozen people or a few dozen people that they might suffer serious bodily harm or death?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense so that they wouldn't do it. Either one, it's too expensive, or at most we have 50 people here.
Most of the time when we
Big
see
deal.
it's budget. I mean, that's the thing, at least as we look at things, it's budget. It's the same reason when we look at why people don't have good insurance, it's budget.
Right.
They're making budgetary. And again, I get it. You're on a budget, you're making risk determinations, but I feel like a lot of times agents that sell insurance, a lot of times are only focused on budget.
Right.
And they're maybe not focusing enough on risk, exposure, liability, some of those things. Again, I know how they're going to defend it after the event, but you'd think that someone would have said, let's at least get a big loudspeaker and something that we can turn on quickly in the event of a flood or something, Again, these happen quick, but there's plenty of videos out there that normally you hear some noise right before a flood. They're loud. They're normally not just this slow meandering. There's some things with tsunamis that are, there's telltale signs of a tsunami even without the warning bell. The ocean recedes. There's normally some signs, and you'd think those, even if it's just a 30-second heads up, that type of notice could have blasted through the camp and woke everyone up.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, most people just don't know, though, right? And that's also presuming a lot. That's presuming a lot of people know what to look for. I mean, think about the Thailand tsunamis. How many people were on the beach?
Just
seeing and recognizing, and in fact, there's video, right, of the ocean receding.
People just walking
and people were like, not recognizing that was a clear sign of a tsunami.
No, but I mean, like not from the attendees, but like, again, if I'm in a flood zone and again, you're running a camp and you're protecting children, at least, again, it's the manager, whoever's running it.
Oh, yeah, they would know.
You would think that they would at least know, hey, we're in a flood zone. We need to at least throw up some type of warning system that can wake people up quickly.
For sure.
And they may, just like when you go on a cruise ship, the first thing you do is you do the safety meeting.
Right.
And you learn how to put on a life jacket.
Right.
You'd think that same type of thing would be like, hey, welcome to camp. And real quick, here's the 3 things we're looking at. Snake bites. And you know what? We're in a flood zone. Right. So if there is a flood, this little warning thing's going to go off and we're all going to run to high ground, which is over there in the blue zone.
This is where we go. This is where we go.
Right. You think that would have been kind of the first little meeting, and it just doesn't.
Maybe they did. I mean, maybe they did. I don't.
Again, we're presuming a lot.
But notwithstanding, even if they did, it's still not sufficient, obviously, for the act of God they encountered.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, I think what's happening is they're probably settling out for the policy limits of everything they have to all these sweet families that lost their daughters at this camp. It's so sad because and we get it. Budget constraints are budget constraints. You can only pay what you can afford.
Yeah.
Sometimes people pay what they can't afford.
Yeah.
The loss of life one life is too much.
Well, that's the family. I mean, the loss of a child just
no amount of money.
There's no amount of money. So even if they had been adequately insured and had all the assets in the world, there's no award that's going to satisfy justice in these cases.
That's one of the hardest things in what we do when we say, and we're negotiating on behalf of our clients, because justice, like you just said, it can only come in the form of money. But it's so hard when we say, we got this great result.
Yeah. You
should be so happy. And you're like,
they're not.
What?
Well, and
you could get $100 million.
There's no.
Are they happy? No.
They did not want. As soon as they invent time machine, that's the only thing that's ever going to make our clients happy.
Will it put your amputated leg back on, or will it get you out of that wheelchair if you're paralyzed?
Yeah.
No. Is it going to reverse the brain damage that we have a client right now? I swear is a real life Dory, legit real life Dory. Not as cute, not as blue as Dory. They made Dory look really cute in Finding Nemo. But in real life, it's not so cute.
Well, and Ellen DeGeneres in real life was apparently really mean on set.
Yeah,
maybe Dory. No. Maybe she's not. We shouldn't put Dory on such a pedestal. No, I'm just kidding.
But real life Dory, right? You can't reverse. You
the
can't
loss of
reverse
blood to a whole section of your brain.
That has turned this individual into a real life Dory.
Yeah.
And when you watch,
how long had you been with a specific client? They looked at a pamphlet on the wall or whatever. And
is that you? A couple hours.
Is that you on the pamphlet on the wall?
No, that's not me.
That's not me.
It's just sad. So yeah, but that's what we have. That's a system that we have to work within, and I'm presuming that that's a system that unfortunately these families are having to deal with. They're resolving the claims for whatever reason. For whatever reason, HTR, Texas Hill Country Resort, is digging their heels in. and not wanting to pay the family of Jada Floyd. Now, what arguments they're making, I don't know. What the details of that case is, I don't know. But just knowing the fact that there's a lawsuit filed on their behalf against that resort tells me there's a dispute in liability.
Yeah.
And they're saying, we're so sorry for the loss of your daughter, not our fault.
Yeah. Well, and in those cases too, we've been there. This is what I hope, and we know this from other cases, is you hope the defense attorney keeps making the dumb mistake of not paying out the full extent of the policy, keeps arguing liability, and that goes in front of a Texas jury who awards well beyond what the policy limit was. And then that insurance company is on the hook for the entirety of that judgment.
Exactly.
Those are what you hope for. Because, again, it's one thing when we have to tell a client, like, look, the insurance company paid out the liability, they paid out the whole policy, and we're kind of dealing with those constraints. And so we've got to put our negotiating hat on against your health insurance company or against the doctors and all their medical bills. That's kind of the second component of a case sometimes is step one is just getting the insurance money in, but then step two is negotiating the bills lower.
Right.
If they have $400,000 in bills and $100,000 in liability. But there's a lot of cases and some big ones. We had some close colleagues down in Las Vegas that I think it was $100,000 policy, just turned it into a $28 million verdict that all goes against
the insurance company
who pays that because they had the ability to settle for the policy limits and didn't.
And they refused.
And so
does it make our clients any happier? I don't know. No. But at least there's some sense of justice to it.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to do.
Well, at least the justice that our civil system can offer, which is monetary justice.
And that obviously falls short of
true justice.
Justice. But that's all we got.
Legal justice. I get what we call legal justice.
Yeah, it's legal justice.
Yeah.
It may not be fair justice, but it's legal justice. And that's what we got. So hopefully those families are obtaining legal justice. Their lives are changed forever, unfortunately. But how can we avoid it in the future, right? And I guess that's a big part of what we do as injury lawyers is we got to hold companies accountable. We got to hold people accountable for their acts and or omissions, and so that it doesn't happen in the future. Yeah. That's really the key.
Well, and luckily, some of these big verdicts do. I mean, you get a big verdict on Firestone, for example. They don't make tires and vehicles that roll over like those cases were all done by civil plaintiffs' attorneys throughout the kind of early and mid 90s into the 2000s against Firestone, and I can't remember if it was Jeep or who the SUV company was, but all of those rollovers led to safer standards, and so
we're not driving Pintos, anymore, right?
Even the Volkswagen Bug, and a lot of those vehicles that were deemed unsafe, you still see those around as more of the classic car style, but they make modifications based partly on liability and exposure, and for making vehicles safe and those kind of things,
and products safe. And
so we hope in these flooding cases, one, you hope for as much legal justice for the victims as we can, but then we also hope for change, that these are people hear about these things, know about these things, and then change so it doesn't happen again.
Right. Premises liability, safety, all those things are super important to what we do, and hopefully we're making change. If you guys feel like you think you have a case or wonder whether you have a case or whether there's liability or exposure to product liability or premises liability or whatever it might be, reach out to us. You can obviously subscribe to this podcast and reach out to us via wherever you subscribe to or on social media sites. We're Instagram, Facebook, TikTok.
We're even on LinkedIn.
You can go to our website. We have a chat. And so reach out to us. The consults are always free and we're happy to help. And even if you're not in Utah, we're happy to help. Right now, we're kind of in the spotlight. So if you guys are interested in Utah, pues, that's where we are.
Yeah.
Did I just throw out a Spanish word? I kind of did. Pues.
Did you?
Yeah. I just said pues. I don't know. Why am I speaking Spanish
For those who don't know, Tyler's also bilingual.
I am.
Español.
So if you speak Spanish, then sos en español. So yeah, we speak Spanish, and that just kind of randomly came out.
Hey, just flow with it.
Sometimes it just comes out.
Yesterday was,
I was speaking a lot of Spanish over the last couple of days, so maybe that's why.
Well, and Mexican Independence Day was
And
recently,
happy
so
Mexican Independence Day to all those to celebrate.
maybe you're still just wanting to,
Yeah, throw it out there and
like it.
yeah, happy Mexican Independence Day to everybody.
Yeah.
Anyways, you guys, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. This is what we do. We're passionate about it. It's hard sometimes to talk about it. It's hard sometimes to have to, be that counselor at times, but it's also rewarding. So it's rewarding when we know that we're actually helping people and getting answers when they can't get them themselves. So, and that legal justice that for whatever reason is oftentimes elusive. So reach out to us. We want to win for you. That's what we do. That's at the center of everything we do is winning for our clients, period. And you guys, until next time, leave early, slow down, stay safe. Remember, we live in a community, wherever you find yourself, hopefully of good people, always trying to just do the right thing, get to point A to point B, and your B is not any more important than the next person's. So be mindful, considerate of all those around you. Until then, I leave you with that.